Welcome to the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford, coming to you live again on a Saturday afternoon from the Mile Highland City. And today we've got a pretty well-rounded show ahead. I've got some big, national, international news. I've got a story that's tied into sports and and some local news as well. That's personal to where I'm at in the greater Denver metropolitan area. So that's what we've got on the docket for today. So the first thing I've got ready to start with is the end of CNN Plus, barely lasting a month. So let's get that story up for y'all. And of course, they got Brian Stelter to be one of the frontmen for this story. CNN Plus, the streaming service that was hyped as one of the most significant developments in the history of CNN, will shut down on April 30th, just 1 month after it launched. Wonder why? CNN Plus customers will receive prorated refunds of subscription fees, the company said. The decision was made by new management after CNN's former parent company, Warner Media, merged with Discovery to form Warner Brothers Discovery earlier this month. The prior management team's vision for CNN Plus runs counter to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zalaw's plan to house all of the company's brands under one streaming service. Some CNN Plus programming may eventually live on through that service. Other programming will shift to CNN's main television network. In a complex streaming market, consumers want simplicity and an all-in service which provides better experience, more value than standalone offerings, and for the company, a more sustainable business model to drive our future investments in great journalism and storytelling. Discovery's boss, J.B. Perrette, said in a statement. So that paragraph right there is pretty much why we haven't seen the extra network of MSNBC's fail, which is because they got their extra programming under Peacock. Because if that MSNBC extra streaming platform was on its own, it probably would have been into the same predicament as you see with CNN Plus right now. Hundreds of CNN Plus staffers may lose their jobs, Lick said in an internal memo that all CNN Plus employees will continue to be paid and receive benefits for the next 90 days to explore opportunities at CNN, CNN Digital, and everywhere else in the Warner Brothers Discovery family. Staffers who aren't absorbed elsewhere in the company will receive a minimum of 6 months severance, he added. And I think that's pretty much the important, juicy stuff of the matter when it comes to this CNN Plus downfall. Let's take a look at this objectively here. Did anyone really ask for CNN Plus? Have you seen how much the ratings have dropped since the election? The two main liberal corporate institutions of news, when you include MSNBC as well, they have been falling down pretty hard. Compare that to Fox News, who has been able to sustain itself better. But this is actually good in my mind because we don't need more corporate media institutions trying to overflood and saturate the market. Because what we need is independent journalism to be more competitive and on that playing level. So keep this in mind. They've wasted $300 million on this project, and it lasted about as long as Quibi. Back when, I mean, I went to college for journalism, so there are going to be some people who are going to lose their jobs. And back when I was rural, I would have felt more bad over this. But for me, my focus is more on the corruption of these institutions trying to control the narratives and the type of stories that get the right attention paid to, which is really contradictory from what you're learning a lot in journalism school about not being biased in your reporting, but there's a major bias in what you select to cover. And I think when you look at one of the big reasons why CNN is failing in a pretty big way is partly in due to people wanting to get their news more from independent journalists and the fact that post election you naturally get a drop in this type of stuff, so to speak. But I'm sure that this recent clip of Stelter at a conference when a young uh, college student called out CNN, I think this didn't really help get people's trust. Let me take a moment to put that up.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Seltzer. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media and CNN in particular seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean,
Brian.
there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it. But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members. That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together, to your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust. We don't talk about it enough, though. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And with regards to the regime, I think you mean the President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
No surprise there that, well, first off, Leah Neely, good to see you here once again. But back to the point. Once again, this is another one of these cowardly, spineless answers from Brian Stelter. I mean, to brush everything that young student said as right-wing narratives when most of that stuff he said, the left can apply it as well. And you're talking about democracy once again. There is no democracy. There's no democracy, whether it's a democratically controlled Congress, no democracy, whether it's a completely controlled democracy by Republicans, even though both sides, I'm sure, are crying pretty equally that democracy isn't existing when the other party isn't in charge. Let me take that back a bit. The Fox News is actually probably complaining about how this isn't a republic right now. But when you hear your most notable personalities at CNN doing this, you wonder why people aren't flocking in droves to sign up for a redundant service like CNN Plus. And the fact that one of your biggest faces of the company, let's not forget a few months back, Brian Stelter asked Jen Psaki, how do we do our job better? Does that sound like a guy who is confident enough in his journalism to stand up to challenge powerful people? Because that's what real journalism is about, is being adversary in the right moments. And when you're just propagandist and extensions of the administration or a certain party, then you're not real journalism. So that's why we don't feel bad when we see these types of institutions fall, even though there's probably a small amount of innocent people who are going to lose their jobs over this. But a lot of those people are also complicit to the problem as well. But now let's shift into some better news. Chilean journalist Gonzalo Lira has been lost for about the past few days, but the good news is he's popped back up again. Yesterday, he went on and did an interview with Richard Medhurst. A really long interview, a lot of valuable information in that. So I figure I'll play like maybe the first minute or two from that interview, then give some further thoughts as well. Give me a moment to get that up on the screen.
Journalist. He's residing in Kharkiv in Ukraine, and there's a fear that he was disappeared, so to speak. Well, he's here with me. He's here live in the flesh, and thankfully he's okay. Gonzalo, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Richard. Thank you very much for having me on. And hi, chat. How's it going?
I think we've got about 1,000 people watching. So again, guys, please make sure you hit the like button. It helps with the algorithm. Gonzalo, can I just ask you what the hell happened? Because everybody was worried. You were set to appear on George Galloway's show, and then you didn't show up, and people were saying all sorts of things. You yourself, you said that if we don't hear from you within 12 hours, that you've likely been picked up by the SBU, which are the Ukrainian security services. Is that what happened? Were you picked up by the SBU?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And legally, for the time being, I can't discuss the period from the time I was detained. I was detained on April 15th at around, I do believe around 1:20 p.m., or roughly around that time. And I cannot discuss in any detail whatsoever that period, that lost week, if you will. I can say that they sent 8 guys that were heavily armed.
Oh, really?
That's kind of flattering. Yeah, you know. Me, middle-aged, unarmed, and 8 heavily armed men. Yeah, I felt very flattered. But no, seriously, I can't
Wow.
talk about it. I actually signed a document that I understand that in the law in Ukraine during a period of investigation, you can't discuss anything that has gone on during this period of time, and so I am going to abide by that rule.
So this is like an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So sort of.
During the time of the investigation until a final sentence is handed down. Yeah.
But Gonzalo, I'm confused. I thought Ukraine is a shining liberal democracy. They don't come and arrest journalists. What are you telling us? This is interesting. This is really interesting. You mentioned.
See, it's public knowledge. It's public knowledge that the Zelensky regime has in its power Viktor Medvedchuk, who was the opposition leader. Now, for those viewers who don't understand the significance, it's sort of like if say Boris Johnson had Keir Starmer arrested.
I wish, but
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. But I understand.
You know what I'm saying? Or like, yeah, or if Joe Biden just put I don't know, Trump under house arrest or something like that. I mean, like really outrageous kind of behavior that does not square at all with this picture that Zelensky is this paragon of this paradigm rather of democratic virtue. I mean, the guy, just a few weeks ago, he outlawed every opposition political party. Last year, and the year before, in 2020 and 2021, he shut down all of the opposition news channels.
Right.
And he has his goons have persecuted opposition journalists, have disappeared them. A problem that is going on right now is that, you see, Ukraine is a country of 45 million people before the conflict. And rough estimates are that roughly a third of that population people.
So I think right there, that's a good stopping point. So if you want to go watch that interview in full, go to Richard Medhurst's YouTube channel, subscribe. It's been great, even though a lot of these independent journalists like Richard are on very shaky ground on YouTube. He's grown a lot. I think I subscribed to him when he was at like about 55,000 subscribers, and he's now over 110. So that growth has been great to see. Some people that, even in these tough times of trying to fight the YouTube algorithm, they're starting to see some real growth on there. And Richard is one of those guys who really deserves it. But back to Gonzalo Lira, this is actually the type of journalism that we should be concerned about. I mean, what country should have the right to hold a journalist captive for like a few days over the way that they're reporting things? But no, we know the United States is silent on that. They want you to be upset about their anything related to their corporate media falling apart. But there's real journalists like him who are trying to provide coverage to issues in a way that challenges what powerful institutions try to control people into thinking. And it's pretty wild that he really can't speak on what happened in those few days that he was absent. Then, if you watch that, then about another hour in, he reveals that pretty much locked out of his platforms that he used to report, like his YouTube channel, I think his media platform, his like article writing platform as well. But the United States doesn't want you to care about that. They don't want you to really care about Julian Assange and other types of adversary journalists and political whistleblowers like Mumia Abdul-Jamal and people like that, because they just want you focused in on the narrative that they're selling and not anything more or less than that. That's why that's the crazy part about this story, in addition to the fact that Vladimir Zelensky is supposed to be this liberal hero, and he's blocked off opposition media and political parties a lot in the way that the United States does. They make it a very uneven playing field for anyone who isn't part of trying to get in through the two-party system. And the fact that when it comes to trying to have equal footing to challenge them from a third party, what they do is make that shit harder. We've seen that with them clamp down after Ross Perot had like 22% of the vote in 92. We've seen that happen when Mike Gravel had a chance to be on the debate stage in 2008, but they changed the rules to keep him off. And even though I don't like Tulsi Gabbard, they kind of did the same thing to her as well, because she was still in the race and had delegates, but she wasn't allowed on either. So, plenty of examples of how what the United States accuses other countries of doing, like Russia and China, they're usually the far more aggressive offender. And they're definitely extremely disingenuous when they try to say that they care about press freedom. Because not one person in the United States tied to political connections or corporate apparatus said shit about Gonzalo Lira. Next, we got Joe Biden doing some weird shit again, as he talked about trying to make the military more green. And he's playing up to this new gimmick that he started to do over the past couple of weeks.
In the United States military, every vehicle is going to be climate friendly. Every vehicle. We're going to have no, I mean it. We're spending billions of dollars to do it. And in the United States military, every vehicle.
Oh, that video wasn't long enough, but in the longer version, he's had this new gimmick where he does the handshake to the air, like, but he did keep up the other part of the gimmick where he faces away as he speaks. Oh, yes. About to get into that momentarily. But this, once again, is what we've seen the liberals turn into. They're more interested in the woke imperialism, the rainbow military, because I remember last year there was some military ad when they were trying to be inclusive rather than the fact that then you see the right get mad at the fact that LGBTQ people are being allowed to be in the military. Remember, I think there was a viral clip of Jesse Kelly on Tucker as they were molding over the fact that LGBTQ people were being allowed to be in the military, calling that weak over their hard on for war against China. But that's not important here. Liberals' biggest fallacies is when they don't stand up for anything when they should, is that they stand up for the wrong institutions like the CIA, military industrial complex, and trying to demand those institutions be more inclusive rather than what would work out far better for marginalized communities is seeing them abolished, because the military is the biggest polluter that we have, and just making some of their vehicles more green is not really going to solve the problem that getting rid of the military would. And the fact that they won't. We've seen that a couple years ago, Bernie Sanders I think he was the one who put a bill up on the floor for like a 5 or 10% cut to the military budget. And guess what? More Republicans voted against it than Democrats. And after seeing that quote from Biden, my first thought was to check all those memes pointing out the liberal hypocrisy of the military. Is there green in those rainbows? I think I tried to zoom in, but I couldn't tell. Someone's going to have to update those memes for Joe's rainbow death cult. And just to show you the type of destruction that the United States does on a daily basis, Danny Haifong, the Black Agenda report and host of The Left Lens. The U.S. drops 46 bombs per day on nations abroad. China, 0. None. Not a 1. This alone demonstrates that the U.S. is a real threat to humanity. And that's what their mindset is at right now. It's the fact that, oh, those bombs and drones, well, we gotta add a new color to the rainbow that we've dropping on these black and brown countries. Not the fact that the way to really be inclusive is to not attack those countries at all, whether it's with war, whether it's boots on or off the ground, trying to crush them with sanctions. It's not the answer. And we're about to point out some of the hypocrisy that United States has when it comes to the way that they frame Russia and Ukraine, and the Israel-Palestine issue, because it's very ironic how U.S. takes the wrong side on both issues so badly. And this is a tweet yesterday from Nick Cruz of Revolutionary Blackout Network. The West is currently giving the guy on the right billions in weapons while bombing the girl on the left and calling her an anti-Semite. This is where we're at right now. Even though I do think there's a lot of similarities between Nazis and Zionists, it's more blatant and out in the open when the United States wants to send $3.4 billion to essentially help Nazis fight against Russia. And the fact that they're also the same people who want to call people who are against the way that Palestinians are being attacked by Israel anti Semites, including those Semitic Palestinians. Even though it's crystal clear that anyone calling this out, that this has nothing to do with religion when calling out the way that Israel is committing war crimes and dropping tear gas in Palestinians' places of worship. And Naftali Bennett is out in the open and admitting that he doesn't mind killing Arabs. And you see this type of genocide taking place in Ukraine on not to the same level as Palestine, but it's still there on some scale. And it's part of the reason why Russia is responding back to Ukraine. And you can make the argument that they're actually more in the defensive rather than Ukraine, which is the way that the United States has been going about pushing this message for a while. And this is just wild to me. The fact that liberal institutions have gotten so many people to take the side of the wrong side on both issues. I mean, if there's a country that is the United States imperialist right-hand man, it is Israel. They were the one country who stood up for the United States for the way that they treated Cuba last summer. Remember that whole SOS Cuba that they tried to get to take off here? It was mainly a white Cuban staged thing where it really wasn't that popular. Then you saw rappers like Pitbull sound a lot like your patriotic Republican when talking about this. But if you saw what was really going on in Cuba, it was the fact that they came out overwhelmingly in favor of their government staying in place. So there's so many parallels to connect here. Time and time again. Especially since why it's important to point it out is because the attacks on Gaza have been falling completely under the radar because they got you feeling more bad about a white Eastern European country instead of all the Black and brown people in places like Afghanistan, Yemen. That's getting swept under the rug. And the only way you can really find what's going on about it is a place like Twitter. And that's why this hypocrisy in the way the U.S. institutions accuse Russia of being a war criminal when the United States has the longest list of war crimes of anyone. They're doing things in like 80 different countries, whether it's the global south, Africa, the Middle East, you name it. If there's a country that isn't in the best place they could be, it's probably because the United States did something to put them in that spot. And now we're going to get into one of the more annoying things that we've seen happen over the course of these past couple months with Russia and Ukraine. It's the fact that now you're seeing the nasty nationalism being done towards Russians in the sports world once again. So I've got an article to read on that. Wimbleton's decision to ban Russian players has drawn the ire of the strongest voices in tennis. Wimbledon announced this week that it will ban Russian and Belarusian athletes from competing. The decision has caused outrage in tennis, angering two of the sport's main governing bodies. Novak Djokovic, the sport's most prominent star, has also criticized the ban, calling it crazy. Wimbledon, tennis's most iconic and beloved tournament, is facing widespread criticism from the sport after announcing that it would unilaterally ban Russian and Belarusian athletes from competing in 2022 following the invasion of Ukraine. In the circumstance of such unjustified and unprecedented military aggression, it would be unacceptable for the Russian regime to derive any benefits from the involvement of Russian or Belarusian players with the championships, the statement read. It is therefore our intention, with deep regret, to decline entries from Russian and Belarusian players to the Championships 2022. While sports around the world have already banned Russian athletes from competing as a result of the invasion, tennis has so far taken a more lenient approach, allowing players from both countries to compete as normal, with the caveat that they cannot compete under their national flags and must participate as neutrals. Wimbledon, however, has decided to go one step further, partly in part because of the fear of world number 2 Daniil Medvedev could very well win the tournament, be presented with the trophy by a member of the British royal family, and hand Vladimir Putin a major PR boost. In banning Russian and Belarusian players, Wimbledon has alienated many of the loudest and most influential voices in the sport. The decision was the subject of the swift condemnation by the ATP, which is responsible for the elite worldwide men's tennis tour, and the WTA, which oversees women's tennis. Within a few hours of Wimbledon's announcement, both organizations released scathing statements. The ATP said the ban is unfair and risks setting a damaging precedent, while the WTA accused British tennis authorities of discrimination against the banned players. Discrimination in the decision to focus such discrimination against athletes competing on their own terms as individuals is neither fair nor justified, the WTA said. Discrimination based on nationality also constitutes a violation of our agreement with Wimbleton that says our player entry is based solely on ATP rankings. So I think that gets into the bulk of the article right there. And what we're seeing once again is after a few days of when this started back in late February, we saw FIFA step in and get ready to ban Russia from future Olympics, but specifically soccer in that instance. And this is just wild to me how Russia is being treated like they're the biggest purveyor of crimes ever in humanity, when the United States pretty much gets to go anywhere. Because applying that logic, would US born athletes really be able to compete anywhere else if they were treated to the same standards as Russia? This is really sick nationalistic logic being applied here. Just like in the way racism and sexism gets applied in the similar way in instances. This is wild because as of right now, I don't think we have any active Russian players in any of the major sports leagues here, but I wonder what would have happened if this conflict had taken place while Andrei Karolinko or Timofey Mozgov were still in the NBA. Would they still be welcome to be on their NBA team if they were playing right now? In the same way that the two Ukrainian NBA players were still supported, which are Alex Lynn and Savi Mikhayak. These are things you have to think about. But at the same time, the reason why the United States still gets welcomed around the world is because I think a lot of countries have the understanding that they are capable of separating people from the actions of their government. And the fact that this logic is completely thrown out of the window when it's applied to Russian athletes. Do you think every Russian is in support of what their side is doing in this? Because I saw when this first started, there were a lot of Russian people who took to the streets because they did not want to see action taken. Just like in the way that there's a lot of Ukrainians who are upset about the actions of their country staying involved in this conflict. And I think a lot of people from other countries are willing to give Americans the benefit of the doubt that you're someone that isn't supportive of the nefarious foul shit that rulers in your country are doing to others. And I think they're trying to make us in this position because they want to continue the Russophobia. They want us to hate all Russians, and that's not going to work for people who are thinking more critically about the situation here at hand. And this is trivial and petty when you look at this And it's honestly going to get worse. I mean, the Boston Marathon, which just happened this past Monday, they also are banning Russian and Belarusian athletes from participating in the events. So I wonder how, and we know that the outrage levels would be through the fucking roof if we knew of another country that banned American athletes from participating. But it's all fine when when it comes to the countries who have you have been told to hate, which the main two on that list, two of the top three right now are Russia and China. And we saw some of that happen recently with the Olympics and how we're surprised that a Chinese American athlete actually they want you to be shocked when athletes say positive things about their experience in China. This is the deranged propaganda that is sickening. And it's why it's really stupid when you look at things this way. I feel like I'm getting through this much faster than I thought, but I think the show is a bit better around an hour rather than trying to stretch things out into a 2-hour show like I did a lot last summer. By the way, I'm getting close to a full year on this channel. It'll be happening sometime next month. So I will try to come up with something for a year-long celebration stream. Maybe I'll try to spotlight what I felt were some of the best moments of the channel, some really good viral clips from the few guests that I've been able to have on the star. So we're going to close today's episode with a local story here. Governor Jared Polis of Colorado is trying to side with Republicans to prevent rent control in mobile homes. So after going over this article, I can tell you a bit of the personal connection that this has for my past. Rent controls for Colorado mobile homes is doomed by Jared Polis' veto threat. And this is by Andrew Kenny of CPR. Lawmakers on Friday moved significantly to trim back a bill aimed to protect mobile home residents from big rent hikes after Governor Polis threatened to veto it. The bill, HB 22-1287, would have set a cap on annual rent increases for mobile homes, making it the first statewide instance of rent stabilization or rent control. Polis told sponsors he would veto the bill if the rent limits weren't removed, according to Democratic Rep. Andy Bosneckner, who he claimed the bill had enough support to pass the legislature as it was. But in face of Polis's opposition, he planned Friday to amend it. Absent another policy solution from the office of the governor to address this well-stated need, we felt it was necessary to pull law stabilization out of the bill in order to ensure these other vital protections from residents, said Bosenecker. a first-year representative in an interview. The amended bill still includes other reforms such as protections for residents whose parks go up for sale. The governor believes that prefab modular homes and mobile homes are an important part of the housing solution for our state and supports mobile home reforms as long as they won't lead to a closure or abandonment of mobile home communities, wrote Connor Cahill, a spokesman for the governor, in an email. He also pointed to other housing efforts underway in state government. Bo Seinecker said he spoke with the governor, but Polis hasn't offered any alternatives for limiting rent hikes. Wonder why? When you see the way that Democrats have tried to bullshit with you on the Democratic Party being this pro-worker party, and their only response is to tell you to buy electric cars and to be prepared for mileage taxes. How's that worker friendly? The leaders of the House and Senate have also met with Polis on the bill. House Speaker Alec Garnett declined to comment on the conversation, but Garnett said he supports the rent stabilization proposal. Senate President Steve Feinberg also supported rent stabilization, a spokesman said. The rent stabilization would have limited rent increases to 3% or the rate of inflation, whichever is higher. Here's the problem. As of right now, you're seeing President Biden, he's being known for being the inflation king, which is like currently the inflation rate is about 7.5%. And healthy inflation is supposed to be 3%. And think about how problematic it is that we are in a point where society is, the way things are set up, it's to cater to the little man who is able to exploit poor people with being able to uh, jack up prices constantly. And I'm sure and it's not just 3%. You see, usually when you're in an apartment, that shit gets up to like 10-15%. 3% would actually be far more manageable when you compare that to 10-15%, especially on the working poor, who many of them already have to work 2 jobs. And that could even be 2 people working multiple jobs. Certain instances, you may see 3 just to survive. And their answer is to respond to the concerns of the landlords. In other words, he supports increasing homelessness. Democrats pull the same crap here in California. Thanks so much for that comment, Chris Wingler, because that's actually a point I like to make a lot, because I've seen multiple times where California has had rent control in their ballots. And the last couple times that they've had it, it's been voted against. And I know that's because there's a lot of those rich areas of California like Silicon Valley and the nice and around the LA where those people come out in droves to prevent the rent control reform that is direly needed. And in a lot of ways, Jared Polis is a lot like California politicians like Gavin Newsom. And now we get into those tiers of the little man, of the free market. Imagine how you would feel if the generational wealth was robbed from you and your family simply because we could not find a solution to the issue, Bozenecker said in a speech on the floor. Republicans thanked Polis for his opposition, saying rent limits would have led to unintended side effects. Rent control is bad economics, warned Kevin Van Winkle. Why is it always bad economics when it's something that doesn't allow the rich the freedom to exploit the people under them with impunity? Why is giving working class people more disposable income not? Why can't that be good economics? Or why can't we rely on people being able to support businesses with the increased spendable money as opposed to the fear mongering that we often have over the wage discussion, which is having to cut hours and whatnot? We are disappointed with the governor for not staying with the working class community members most impacted by the current economic crisis. Our neighbors in mobile home parks need this cap to care for their families and make ends meet, wrote Dre Chiroboga Floor, state director of the working women's advocacy group 9 to 5 Colorado. In an email, a representative for the mobile home industry wasn't immediately available for comment. With rent control eliminated, the bill still would have a menu of significant changes, including aimed at giving residents a greater chance to purchase the parks where they live. How do you think these people could rally up together and purchase the parks when they're barely having the money to survive there, to live on a month-to-month basis? This is insane logic to think that the working class poor can chip in and be able to buy stuff. I mean, we have hard enough of a time trying to uh, get mutual aid off supported in the way it should be. Oh, we gave the working class a chance. That's all that really counts. Just like having a foot in the door for healthcare is good enough when it should be free at the point of access. The bill would extend the opportunity to purchase window. If a park goes up for sale, residents currently have 90 days to get organized and make a competing bid. That period would be extended to 180 days. Give local governments and other public entities the right of refusal to intervene in a sale. If a city can beat the best purchase offer, the owner would have to sell the local government instead. Require landlords to pay residents if a park is shut down and redeveloped. They could receive relocation cost or payment for the value of their home. Tiny regulations around fees and evictions. So, in essence, all that bill is really offering is the illusion of allowing the middleman the same chance to be just like the exploitive people above them. So, originally, that bill was supposed to have a good form of rent control in place because 3% should be where the maximum raise of rent rate should be at. Hell, the sad part is there's workers out there who can't even get 2% raises yearly, but their rent's going up 10, 15% on a yearly basis. I lived in a mobile home for 6 months last year. And this is a major blow to people who live in those mobile home communities because in the Denver area, most of those mobile homes are like on the fringes of the greater metro area, like Thornton, Westminster. There's a bit in Littleton, a small amount of mobile homes in Lakewood and Inglewood, but they generally aren't in like good areas you have access where you have good access to like transportation or the ability to walk to grocery stores. It's a, depending on where your home is, it could actually be really hard, especially if you're in one of those homes and you're not driving, because of the fact that with the way that gas, the how high that price is, some people just can't drive. But at the same time, some of those people may be in a situation where they have to walk like a half hour just to get to public transportation. And your response that some of these uh, lawmakers have, like Jared Polis or Gavin Newsom, is tough shit, pretty much. And that their response is a lot like bootstrap mentality from the blue. If you may want to get a second job, maybe the other person living with you needs a second job. If that's not enough, get a third person with you to live in that home. That way you make enough because that's pretty much been the norm in California for a while. You'll have your main people living in a home, then every room has a roommate. And Colorado is now the fifth most expensive major city, Denver, that is, the fifth most expensive major city to live in the country. And they want that type of lifestyle to be in Colorado as well, where you have a random roommate to fill every room in a home because they do not want to get in the way of the profit motive. They want the profits continue to rise, but the wages to stay stagnant. And this is a bipartisan thing. If you think that this is just being prevented just because there aren't enough Democrats in your state and federal congresses to get real things passed, take a look at California. Democratic supermajority, and they make sure that you never have a chance for like state level health care. They're extremely capitalist in the same way that just your Republicans are accused of being. And that's the sad part is there's not enough people out there who have been able to come to this conclusion just yet. we've got, and these are the type of actions that are only going to increase homelessness, as Chris Wingler pointed out in the comments. That's what's going to happen, because going through the city of Denver, even last decade, you would see the homeless, they would just be in a few isolated parts of the city. You may see them along Federal, Wadsworth, and you may hardly even see them on some of the other major streets. But you would definitely see them on like the more populated ones, including Broadway and Colfax as well. But the point is, they want that to be even seen on those secondary major streets in addition to that. Because what we do know is homelessness could end with $20 billion. But we got billionaires like Elon Musk who would rather double that money to buy Twitter. And when you got Pete Buttigieg, who last year was pushing for like the mileage tax, and I imagine a lot of people in mobile home communities who are already on the fringes of metropolitan areas all across major cities in this country, probably having to drive 45 minutes to an hour to work. Some instances, 2 hours, especially when you're in a traffic congested state like California, Texas, and New York. And their response, and Jared Polis's response, was to essentially say, if you can't afford it here, you're just going to have to move somewhere further away. And you're just going to have to pay even more in gas to get to work. Because they're, at the end of the day, Democratic led institutions are serving to protect profit motives in the same, even in a more egregious manner than Republicans, because Joe Biden does not believe in punishing capitalists, which is why, and this type of stuff takes off from the top down. He does not believe in punishing capitalists. He wants them to be rewarded even more. And this is why you see inflation going up so crazy, is because they're actually being more free market capitalists than even Republicans are. Sad it is to see. And that's not me being pro-Republican by any stretch. That's me pointing out how far right Democrats have been moving over, especially over this past decade. And the elitism is actually coming out more strongly from those Democrats. And they're setting the stage for increased homelessness, more situations where you just have to have way more people living in homes than they should, because we should be in positions where we can afford to live on a living wage where you don't have to work more than 40 hours. In fact, it'd be better if it was only a 4-day work week. But their interests go completely against a healthy work-life balance in society. I'd like to thank y'all for joining in for another episode of the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford. And the next stream will probably be on Tuesday or Thursday next week. And hopefully I will have a couple of different guests for those shows because they will be better. And I will probably work on that as soon as tomorrow or Monday. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend. And this is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night.